Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says core sector output shrinks in June, fertilizers buck the trend. Before we understand what is given in this article, we have to understand what is the core sector. A core sector has about 8 important industries. What are these industries? This includes coal, crude oil, natural gas, refinery products, fertilizers, steel, cement, as well as electricity. How do we remember this? It becomes very ambiguous, and in the exam tension, we might have a scenario where we might forget what are these core industries. For that, we have a simple formula. What is the formula? It is called as Fern C3. What does this Fern 3 stands for? F here stands for fertilizers, E stands for electricity, R stands for refinery products, N stands for natural gas, S stands for steel. The other C3 that is left over stands for coal, crude oil, as well as cement. In case it gets ambiguous and you're not able to recollect, just remember these words so that in case there is a question in your examination, you would be able to answer them. Another important point from your preliminary examination is you will have to know which has the maximum weightage, because they can give you a question as to which industry has the maximum weightage or arrange as per the weightage in the core sector, for which we have to understand that refinery products have the maximum, followed by electricity, and then we have the steel. So the first place is held by the refinery products, the second by the electricity, and third by the steel. So kindly remember this weightage as well, because this can be very important for your preliminary examination. Now the question is, why is it called as the core sector? That is because every other industry, whether it is manufacturing industry, whether it is agricultural sector, or it is to do with household sector, every other industry and households also depend on most of these sectors. Let me give you a simple example. Let's take the example of the construction sector. What we require the most is the cement industry. We also require the steel as well. That is where this becomes important. So the core sector is where those important sectors will be required for every other sector. Let's take the example of the manufacturing sector or great industry and huge industries. What we require is electricity. Let's say about the IT industry. IT industries again require electricity, or if we are speaking about consumables, what we require is transporting and logistic sector that comes in, where all these crude oil and other things become important. So it is called as coal sector because every other industry depends on these sectors, and that's the primary reason it is called as the core sector. The data on the production of these 8 core industries of India is published by the Ministry of Commerce every single month. The current base year for the same is 2011-12, and kindly remember these 8 industries comprise about 40.27% weightage of all those items included in the index of industrial production. What is the present context? According to the data released by the Ministry of Commerce, output of 8 core industries shrank for 4th straight month in June 2020. Most of the sectors did suffer except the fertilizer sector. Why did the fertilizer sector not suffer so much as compared to the other 7 sectors? That is because of the monsoon season. Because we had the monsoon season pretty well this time, and because the agricultural activities were far better, there was an increase with respect to the fertilizer productivity, and as a result all other sectors suffered but except for the fertilizer sector. And when it comes to the fertilizer sector, it actually saw a growth in June with an output rising about 4.2% in comparison to June 2019. When you look at the other sectors, the remaining sector of industries show the contraction. What are the other industries? Let's take the steel sector or the cement sector or energy sector, coal production or crude oil. All these industries did suffer a major contradiction. Now the question is the most important factor of all: what could be the implications for the economy? In view of the national lockdown that was imposed in March, what we see is depreciation in the activity, and as a result what we see is that these core sectors have suffered the loss. We did discuss once again that the core sector is where it is used for multiple industries. The construction sector also relies on cement as well as steel. So because there has been a drop in the construction activity, there is a depreciation or contradiction in the utilization of cement as well as steel. Data also reflects that the manufacturing is comparatively decreased. The decline witnessed in the electricity is also because of less consumption in the manufacturing sector. All these factors ultimately reveal that there is a broader slowdown in the economy and there is overall weakness in the economy because of COVID-19 imposed issues on the economy. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says towards a new normal. We will also have a look at the order given by the Supreme Court. What is this article all about? The government recently came up with Unlock 3.0. The government came up with this Unlock 3.0 guidelines so that all the economic activities could be resumed, and there are certain restrictions which are also imposed where certain activities cannot be revived because of the intentions of the government to keep a check on the COVID-19. What will this article speak about? It speaks about three important sectors. One is about the healthcare professionals. Two is about issues that may surface because of other economic activities. And three, what we will focus is on way forward with respect to the COVID-19. First up, we have to focus on overworked healthcare professionals. What is happening right now? Currently, when you look at the public sector hospitals, the government has very less number of hospitals. They are poorly staffed and they are also underfunded as well. This has resulted in the medical fraternity pushing their limits, working day in and day out. They are increasing their time and also reaching to all the patients so that they can best serve all the patients. Doctors working on COVID-19 patients are exhausted and they are experiencing fatigue as well. Why? Because there are less number of doctors, less number of healthcare professionals, and we have very less number of people who are working in these COVID-19 wards. Since they have been working in all these COVID-19 wards, they also have the premise of getting infected. Few doctors have passed away unfortunately during the service to the patients, and at the same time many also recover, get back to the hospitals and serve the people as well. So the doctors are the soldiers fighting against the enemy of the COVID-19. This is the present scenario, and what are we gifting them? The government is not taking enough, and even if the government has taken certain precautionary measures to help the doctors, the authorities have been showing their lackadaisical approach. What are the various concerns with respect to the healthcare professionals? They have not been given salaries. They are working day in and day out and they are paid very poorly. Some doctors have not been paid as well. Basic allowances have not been given as well. The days they have spent in quarantine now has been treated as holidays and not as working days. This is where the Supreme Court enters into picture and it asks the central government to use all its powers with respect to the Disaster Management Act and make sure that this money that they are getting are not being paid is given to the doctors, because they are serving the humanity, they are serving all of us. So in case they are not being paid or poorly paid, they have to be served justice. So the Supreme Court here has asked the central government to use all its massive powers given under the Disaster Management Act to make sure that the states as well as the other authorities immediately provide them all the money that was supposed to be paid to them. And at the same time, the Supreme Court has also asked the central government to issue orders to the authorities that when they are going into quarantine because they were treating the patient, such is not treated as holidays, such is treated as part of working. What are the other two issues this article speaks about? It says that economic activities cannot be suspended for a very longer period of time. Yes, COVID-19 does kill people, so does poverty as well as unemployment. When economic activities are shut, there could be a possibility where people lose their life and they keep their hungry stomachs, and as a result, they may lose out as well. So what the government has to do is to immediately open up economic activities is one thing. The other issue is with people as well. The government introduces all these lockdown and other key measures. Why? Because it is wanting to protect us, the people. But what do? We do not maintain all the important criterias or the guidelines given by the government. Social distancing is the norm. We violate it. We simply enter all the party halls and enjoy, failing to understand the guidelines are meant for us. We are also requested to sanitize ourselves. We are also requested to face mask ourselves, but we do not do it and we instead ignore it. So this will also test the patience of the government, and at the same time this will also mean that people are ignoring the guidelines given by the government. So what is that the article says? That because we are unlocking, because most of the activities will open right now, we will require certain measures that the government will have to take, and at the same time the people will have to take. What are some of the measures? For that, testing should be unlocked and made available on demand. Let's say there is an asymptomatic person, or there is a symptomatic person who has certain symptoms. In case he has to go to hospital, he does come into picture with number of people and he happens to touch the surface as well. Other people touching the surface may also get infected. So the onus is on the government right now, so that the government will have to provide all the necessary testing kits within a particular area. So the asymptomatic person or the symptomatic person need not have to go long distance, but instead everything is available within a particular radius. This onus is on the government, so that the government will have to provide is the first key important criteria. So a wider and cheaper availability of testing must be the thrust area of the government. And at the same time, there is requirement of the epidemiological data. What is this? Let's suppose we have to know which area has the maximum number of cases. We also have to know how are the people impacted, who are the ones who are infected. Is it the senior citizens? Is it the people in general? So if this particular data is available, policy initiatives can be taken up by the government. So this data will have to be taken by the government, and the same is required for planning. If we do not have this, we will ultimately have self-defeating purposes is the second important fact. So the government will have to collect as much data as possible, so that they can bring policies to cut the menace of COVID-19. So there must be efforts to harvest accurate data with the ease of availability. And most of all, as we initially discussed, to increase the morale of the healthcare workers, salaries will have to be given on time, rest periods will have to be given to all the doctors, more recruitment of voluntary doctors will have to be taken up, and at the same time, since most of these doctors are working in the COVID-19 sections, insurance amount will have to be enhanced. Currently we have about 50 lakhs is what the government has sponsored, but this, if it's possible, will have to be increased to about 1 crore, are some of the important measures that we have to take since Unlock 3.0 guidelines are released. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about intra-Afghan talks. The situation in Afghanistan remains very bleak and violent. Why? Because of the activities of the Taliban. Killings continue. Clashes have increased between Taliban and government forces despite a peace agreement because of the US Taliban deal. Taliban has now announced an Eid ceasefire. In the past, after every ceasefire, the conditions in Afghanistan has resulted in bloodbath and continuation of violence. But there is hope this time. The hope is because of intra-Afghan talks as well as the US Taliban deal. What we have to discuss is what is this US Taliban deal? According to United States of America, it has fought a longest war in Afghanistan. It has pushed in lot of money into it, and what they currently feel is they are wasting their taxpayers' money in another country, and they do not want to spend any more of this money in Afghanistan. As a result, they want to make sure that they are leaving Afghanistan as peacefully and as fastly as possible. That is what this US Taliban deal is all about. According to this deal, United States of America will withdraw its forces from Afghanistan. Taliban at the same time will not allow any other jihadi force to act in Afghanistan. So what has Taliban promised? United States of America has said that they will take back their forces, and Taliban has promised that there will be no other terrorist organization that is operating in Afghanistan. In the same deal, United States of America also said that they'll continue to maintain military bases, and at the same time they will also have what is called as prisoner swap. What is this prisoner exchange? There are about 5,000 Talibani prisoners who are currently under the control of the government. Then there are about 1,000 Afghan security forces who are under the control of the Taliban. So what would happen under the prisoner exchange is that these Talibani terrorists will be sent back to the Taliban, and these government security forces will be given back to the government. This is what is the prisoner exchange. But both the sides have failed to reach an agreement with respect to the prisoner exchange. Why? Because the government feels that Taliban's demands are unacceptable, and at the same time Taliban also feels that the government is not complying by the rules as laid under the US Taliban deal, which is having one of the criteria of intra-Afghan talks. So there was disengagement, there were no talks, the consensus were not able to be built, and as a result this particular talk had failed initially. But now there would be progress after Eid, says this article. So after Eid, the government has also promised that it will release about 5,000 soldiers when there is peace that is reinstated in Afghanistan. So the both sides have now agreed to kickstart all their talks after Eid, and they could do it in a peaceful movement if the ceasefire is extended, is what is this article. It also raises certain concerns as well. What are these concerns? It speaks about how United States of America had completely ignored the government of Afghanistan. Since the government of Afghanistan was not in picture, they do not know the whereabouts of US Taliban deal is one such concern. As United States of America and Taliban were in conversation, one of the key criteria was also ceasefire or stopping all the violent activities of Taliban. In spite of this particular word being put to Taliban, the violent activities continue. So why should the government pay heed to the Taliban force is another important question. The article further goes on to say that there was infighting within the government, one led by Ashraf Ghani, the other led by Abdullah Abdullah. This also gave upper hand to the Taliban because there was no consensus within the government as to how they would operate, how they would enter into a consensus with the Taliban. Taliban was also taking this disadvantage for its own advantage, and it had an upper hand is another concern. And now what we see is that these two parties within the government led by Abdullah Abdullah and Ashraf Ghani have entered into mutual agreement, and now the government as a single unit will start negotiations with Taliban. We will have to wait and watch how this will be unfolded in the near future. As of now, this is what we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says, is Trump empowered to delay the election? What is the context? US President Donald Trump has triggered a new controversy by suggesting that November elections be postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now the question is, does the President of United States of America has the power to postpone the elections? Or if he does not have the power, who has the power to postpone the elections or check a particular date for conduction of the election? According to US Constitution, the United States of America's president does not have any power to postpone the elections. Who has that power? That power is given to the United States of America's Congress. What is Congress here? It includes the House of the Representatives. It also includes the House of the Senate as well. In case they have to postpone the elections or they have to keep a particular date for the conduct of elections, it is the Congress which has to decide it. So they have to pass a new law. They require the approval of both House of the Representatives and the Senate, and this is also subject to the legal challenges as well. Why legal challenges? That is because there was a federal law that was passed and approved back in the year 1845. According to it, there is clearly given mandate. It is unambiguous that the electors of the president and vice president shall be appointed in each state on the Tuesday next after the first Monday in the month of November of that year where the elections is supposed to be conducted, which means the law clearly states that election of the electoral college will happen and elections will happen in November after the first Monday, and that happens to be Tuesday, and in this year it is going to be November 3. So it has a clear cut unambiguous law which is already present in its law. So how can they do it is one perspective. Now let us take a hypothetical situation. What if there is no law passed, or there is a situation where the elections are delayed? In that particular proposition, Article 2 of the Constitution provides that a president is elected for a period of about 4 years. So he would not be the president of United States of America after 4 years. There is another 20th amendment which is present in the Constitution of United States of America. It clearly says the terms of the president and the vice president shall end on noon of 20th of January. So even if it is postponed, the president, that is Donald Trump, will not be the president of United States of America after 20th day of January, which means even if the elections are extended, if it is postponed, the president will not be the president after 20th of January. Who then steps into the office if there is no elections that is conducted? If there is no president, it obviously means it will be the vice president. But kindly remember the difference here. I'm just giving you a comparison of United States of America's president with India's president. Let's suppose there is a president of United States of America who passes away. There is a term, fixed term of about 4 years for which he would be the president of United States of America. But let's say he passes at the end of 2.5 years. Now the vice president of United States of America will become the president of United States of America for the rest of the period. So another 1.5 year, the vice president will become the president of United States of America. The same is not with respect to India. What happens with respect to India? Let's suppose there is a hypothetical situation that the president of India does pass away within the span of about 5 years. There is another 2.5 years that is left. In this 2.5 years, the vice president can become the president, but elections for the president will happen as soon as possible. So after that elections takes place, the vice president will get back as the vice president. So the new president is elected as the president of India. This is the key difference. In the present scenario, with respect to United States of America, if the term of the president is expired, what we will have is the vice president taking over. Since both of them retire on the same day, this as another hierarchy where the speaker, that is the House of the Representative Speaker, will become the president. In case the speaker's term is also ending, what we will have is President pro tem of the Senate who can become the president. Kindly remember, this president pro tem is usually a person who is elected member of the Senate. By the Senate practice stretching way back to the 19th century, the most senior member of the majority party is selected as the president pro tem. But legally, they can also pick whomever they want. But according to historical facts, historical president, it has usually been the senior most member of the majority party. But legally, they are also entitled to pick up anyone from the majority party as well. Have there been any instances where elections have been postponed? A presidential election has not been delayed till now in the United States of America. There have been previous issues like the Spanish flu which happened in 1918, or the American Civil War, or the World War II as well. In all these scenarios, the postponement of these elections has not taken place. So we are not sure if the present elections will also get postponed. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about draft EIN notification. We have had an elaborate analysis of this issue on 20th of June 2020 and recently also on 28th of July 2020 under the first topic. The link for the same will also be given in our description box, so kindly look into that video. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Which of the following actions, if implemented, would reduce the deficit of the government? Disinvestment of the public sector, introduction of new welfare schemes by the government, increasing in GST rates and personal income tax. Which is the correct correct answer. The answer to this is 1 and 3 only. Why? Disinvestment of the public sector will get the money to the government, so the deficit can be reduced, and at the same time increase in the taxation will also increase the revenue for the government. But when the government is implementing certain schemes and programs, it means the government is spending its money, so the deficit will not reduce but instead it will increase. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, as per this particular article, the tax revenue has fallen by about 32.6%. Why? Because the government had imposed lockdown. So because the government had imposed lockdown, economic activities were temporarily suspended. As a result, the GST collections dropped, the corporate tax collection dropped, and as a result, because of less revenue, what we see is the deficit has increased. And also because of the COVID-19 period, the government is also spending excessively. So this has resulted in fiscal deficit is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following: Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Arunachal Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Goa. Which of the above states were once a union territory? The answer to this is 1, 3 and 5. Why? Uttarakhand and Chhattisgarh were broken from a state, so they were not a territory which become a state, but instead they were broken from a single state into multiple states. So the answer to this is 1, 3 and 5. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given with respect to the union territory. So the earlier union territories which were eventually converted or elevated into statehood includes Himachal Pradesh, Manipur, Tripura, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh and Goa. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following are the schemes initiated by the Ministry of Minority Affairs? Nayi Manzil, Saksham, Manas, Cybergram. The answer to this is 1, 3 and 4. Saksham is not the initiative taken by the Ministry of Minority Affairs. Instead, it is the Ministry of HRD, which is now renamed as Ministry of Education. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. So kindly remember, Nayi Manzil is a scheme which aims to benefit the minority youth who do not have a formal school leaving certificate, those in the category of school dropouts or educated in community education institutions like madrasa, in order to provide them formal education and skills, enable them to seek better employment and livelihood in the organized sector. Then we have the Manas, which stands for Maulana Azad National Academy for Skills, which works towards meeting skill upgradation and development needs of the minority community. Then we have the Cybergram, which speaks about imparting digital literacy to students of madrasas and government schools in identified minority concentration area. Then we have Saksham, which is a Ministry of Human Resource Development scheme being implemented by All India Council for Technical Education, aimed at providing encouragement and support to specially abled children to pursue technical education. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to Mulla Periyar Dam, which of the following statements is or correct? It is a dam on the Periyar River in Idukki district of Kerala. The dam is located in Kerala on the river Periyar and is operated and maintained by the Kerala state government. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 1 only. Why? That is because this is not operated and maintained by Kerala state government, but instead it is by Tamil Nadu. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Kindly remember, the dam situated is at the confluence of Mulayar and Periyar rivers. The Periyar National Park in Thekadi is located around the dam's reservoir. The dam was built in late 1800s in the princely state of Travancore and given to British ruled Madras Presidency on a 999-year lease in 1886. The dam is located in Kerala on the river Periyar but is operated and maintained by Tamil Nadu state. Kindly remember, the Periyar river, which flows towards the Arabian Sea, is diverted and the water is going towards the Tamil Nadu. The water here, since it is diverted towards Tamil Nadu, it is used in Madurai, Shivaganga, Ramnath districts for providing irrigation, drinking as well as generation of power in the lower valleys as well. Now let's look into the next practice question. With reference to the Rowlatt Satyagraha, which of the following statements is or correct? The Rowlatt Act was based on the recommendation of Sedition Committee. In Rowlatt Satyagraha, Gandhiji tried to utilize the Home Rule League. Demonstrations against the arrival of Simon Commission coincided with Rowlatt Act Satyagraha. Select the correct answer using the quote given below. The answer to this is 1, 2, and demonstrations against arrival of Simon Commission was not during this period. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Today we have an essay that you guys will have to write. What is the essay topic? Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. The other one, poverty is the worst form of violence. So these two essays should be within the word limit of 1000 to 1200 words. Please write them, put it on the comment section, get it peer reviewed, come up with a constructive criticism. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.